So whether you are, a nursing student burning the midnight oil, prepping for your TEAS or HESI
Oh,
exams,
yeah, those are brutal.
right? Or, maybe you're a professional just trying to avoid sending a completely disastrous reply-all email at work.
We've all been there.
We really have.
Right.
Or, honestly, even if you are simply someone who is insanely curious about the invisible rules of human behavior, today's deep dive is going to fundamentally rewire how you view correct English.
Yeah, we are basically taking a sledgehammer to the whole paradigm today.
Exactly.
Because, people spend just an enormous amount of energy stressing over grammar rules, right? Trying to sound quote-unquote professional or smart.
Oh, totally.
But when you actually look at the science of language, that stress is largely based on a total illusion.
Right. So our mission today is to just completely dismantle that exhausting, rigid idea of perfect grammar. And we're going to replace it with a much more powerful practical tool, which is the science of register.
Which is so much more useful, honestly.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we're diving into this fascinating stack of linguistic history, some truly classic sociolinguistic studies from the 1960s, and some really hard-hitting healthcare communication research.
Yeah, that healthcare stuff is life or death.
Literally.
Yeah.
And we're going to uncover why the words you choose matter so much.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert here, it has very little to do with what a textbook says is, right or wrong.
Right. Because to really master choosing the right words, we first have to just throw out the outdated assumption that language exists on this single objective ladder of formality.
Like a hierarchy.
Exactly. There is no singular peak of proper English that we should all be striving for at all times.
Which, that goes against literally everything we are taught in grade school.
Oh, 100%.
Because we're told formal language. So, standardized grammar, precise word choice, definitely no contractions. We're told that's the gold standard.
Right.
And that informal language like slang, sentence fragments, regional idioms, that's basically just a lazy corruption of the standard.
Yeah. And that framing completely misses the actual function of language. Neither of those modes is correct, while the other is incorrect. Both are actually highly complex, rule-governed systems.
Okay.
They are just suited for completely different social purposes. And the technical umbrella term linguists use for this phenomenon is register.
Register.
Yeah. So register is basically the variety of language you select for use in a particular social context.
Okay, let's unpack this concept of register, because
Right.
I think the easiest way to visualize this for anyone listening is to think about choosing an outfit.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, so like if you were going to a beach bonfire, you wear a swimsuit or shorts.
Right.
But if you were going to a gala, you wear a tuxedo or a gown. Now, wearing a tuxedo to a beach bonfire isn't better or more correct just because a tuxedo was expensive.
Yeah, nobody thinks you're being formally correct at the beach.
Right. It just makes you look totally unhinged because you completely mismatched the environment.
That is exactly it. It's a brilliant way to look at it because, a single person commands many outfits, right? And a single person commands many registers.
Yeah.
And this idea really started gaining traction back in 1959. There was a sociolinguist named Charles Ferguson, and he coined this term diglossia.
Wait, diglossia, break that down for me.
So it translates roughly to two tongues.
Oh, yeah.
And Ferguson was looking at communities like in Arabic-speaking countries or Swiss-German contexts where there is this very strict, highly codified, high variety of language.
Like formal.
Super formal, reserved almost exclusively for like writing, religion, university lectures.
Right.
But then there's a low variety, and that's used at home, in the markets, hanging out with friends.
Gotcha.
And what Ferguson pointed out, which was actually revolutionary at the time, is that there are no native speakers of the high variety.
Wait, really? None?
None. Everyone learns the low variety natively as a child, and then the high variety has to be explicitly taught later in school.
Wow. So it basically proved that separating language by social function is like a universal human experience. It's not some flaw in how we individually speak.
Precisely. It's everywhere. And then an American linguist named Martin Jews took that concept and applied it to English. This was in his 1961 book, The 5 Clocks. Jews showed that fluent native speakers actually shift constantly among 5 distinct styles, or what he called clocks.
5 clocks.
Yeah. And the crazy part is we do this without ever realizing it.
Right. And rather than just, reading these off as a dry checklist, let's look at the extremes first.
Good idea.
So on one end of Jews' spectrum, you have the intimate clock.
Yeah.
And this is the language you use with a partner or a best friend. You share so much context with this person that the language becomes almost like a private code.
Oh, absolutely.
Inside jokes, half-finished sentences, that kind of thing.
Right. And on the absolute opposite end of that spectrum, you've got the frozen clock.
Frozen, like ice.
Exactly. This is text that is static, memorized,
Yeah.
and never changes. So think of the Pledge of Allegiance, or a religious liturgy, or even a lawyer saying, "Objection, Your Honor," in court. There is zero improvisation allowed there.
Okay, so intimate and frozen are the extremes. If we move inward from those extremes, we find the registers we basically use in our daily public lives.
Right.
Next to the frozen clock is the formal register. And this is for one-way communication where you basically don't expect any interruption.
Yeah, like a university lecture.
Right, or a doctor delivering a very serious clinical diagnosis. The speaker plans ahead and purposefully maintains a deliberate social distance.
But you definitely wouldn't use that at the grocery store.
No, definitely not.
Right. So for everyday interactions with people who aren't intimates, you rely on the consultative clock.
Consultative.
Yeah, this is a two-way exchange, but it still maintains a professional distance. So like a customer service call or a nurse taking a patient's medical history.
Okay, that makes sense.
You have to supply background information because you can't assume the other person shares your knowledge.
Right. And then bridging consultative and intimate is the casual clock.
Yeah, the everyday one.
This is for friends and insiders. You drop words, you use heavy slang, and everyone still knows exactly what you mean because of that shared social context.
Right.
And, what I find so liberating about Juice's whole framework is the realization that if you try to use a frozen or formal register with your spouse at home, you don't actually sound smart. You sound bizarre and cold.
Yeah. Completely alienated.
You literally wore the tuxedo to the beach.
Exactly. It's an expected competence to shift between these outfits, basically. But the obvious question is, how do our brains manage this?
Yeah.
I mean, if we are constantly juggling 5 different modes of speaking, how are we not just constantly crashing and using the wrong one?
It feels entirely automatic. I mean,
Right.
I never consciously think, okay, I'm transitioning to the consultative clock right now.
Oh, we do it in milliseconds. And this linguist, Michael Halliday, he actually figured out the mechanics of this. He identified 3 distinct triggers that cause our brains to shift registers. He called them field, tenor, and mode.
Okay, let's translate those for the audience.
Yeah, so think of them like sliders on an audio mixing board inside your brain.
I like that.
So feel is the topic you were discussing. Tenor is your relationship to the person you're speaking with, so like the power dynamic and the level of intimacy.
Right.
And mode is the medium of communication. So is it a spoken conversation, a quick text message, a formal written essay?
Okay, so if I'm talking to my best friend about a movie, the sliders are basically all set to casual.
Right.
But if my boss suddenly walks into the room and asks for a project update, that tenor slider, the relationship dynamic that gets pushed up instantly.
Instantly.
My brain adjusts the audio mix before I even open my mouth.
That audio mixer analogy is perfect because it happens entirely subconsciously. And to really see this mechanism in action, we have to look at William Leboeuf's legendary 1966 department store study.
Whoa, this one is so good.
It was done in New York City. Leboeuf didn't want to bring people into some sterile lab, He wanted to observe that mental mixing board reacting out in the wild.
And I was looking at his methodology for this, and honestly, it strikes me as incredibly sneaky.
It kind of was.
He literally ambushed retail workers on the sales floor. He went to 3 different department stores. There was Saks Fifth Avenue, which was, the upscale one.
Right.
Macy's, which was mid-tier. And S. Klein, which was a budget store.
Yeah, and that ambush was the entire point of the methodology. He needed to capture their unmonitored speech.
Gotcha.
So Leboeuf would walk up to an employee and ask for directions to a department that he already knew was on the 4th floor.
He just played dumb.
Totally, because he specifically needed them to say the phrase 4th floor.
Because of the R sound.
Right. Specifically, the post-vocalic R. That's the R that comes directly after a vowel. In 1960s New York City, dropping that R, so saying something like 4th floor, that was the casual informal choice. Pronouncing the hard R was considered the socially prestigious, formal, correct choice.
Okay, so the employee casually answers 4th floor, often dropping the R.
Right.
But then Leboeuf does this brilliant second step. He pretends he didn't hear them.
Yeah.
He leans in and says, "Excuse me," basically forcing them to repeat the exact same phrase.
Yes. And that simple request to repeat changes the mode slider on their mental mixing board.
Wow.
The employee realizes they weren't understood, so they instinctively start paying closer attention to their own speech. And what LeBeau found was that across all 3 stores, employees pronounced the hard R significantly more often in their careful repetition than in their casual first response.
Wait, I have to push back here.
Okay, go for it.
Because when I first read about this rapid-fire switching, my immediate reaction was to feel a bit cynical.
How so?
I mean, does this mean we are all just phonies? Like, are we all just putting on fake voices to sound fancy whenever we feel judged?
You know, it is a very natural reaction to feel like it's performative, but it's really not about being fake.
Okay.
What LeBeau's data proved is that formality isn't just about grabbing a thesaurus and using big words. Formality shows up in the actual physical mechanics of our pronunciation the very millisecond we start self-monitoring.
That's wild.
It is an unconscious social adaptation. Our brains are literally hardwired to adapt to the listener to ensure clarity and social harmony.
Okay, so we naturally adapt to what society deems prestigious when we want to be clearly understood.
Exactly.
But that actually leads us to a much darker application of this science. Because, I mean, if this is a subconscious reflex, what happens when people whose home environments don't naturally utilize that prestigious register are evaluated by institutions?
Yeah, that transitions us right into the single most consequential misuse of this formal versus informal distinction in modern linguistics.
The Bernstein controversy.
Exactly. So in the 1960s and 70s, a British sociologist named Basil Bernstein introduced this idea of restricted code versus elaborated code. Bernstein argued that working-class children were socialized almost exclusively into a restricted code. By that, he meant informal, highly context-dependent speech.
So basically, Jews' casual or intimate clocks.
Right, exactly. And he contrasted this with middle-class children, who he claimed also acquired an elaborated code. That's the formal, explicit, context-independent speech that schools and standardized exams expect.
Now, the sources note that Bernstein originally intended this as an observation about socialization, right? Like, he wasn't trying to say working-class kids were intellectually deficient.
Right, that wasn't his goal.
But society took that theory and ran in a very, very dangerous direction with it.
Oh, absolutely. Policymakers in both Britain and the United States basically weaponized Bernstein's terms into this deficit theory. They used it as scientific justification to hold back working class and black students in educational policy.
That's so frustrating.
It was. The institutional logic became, well, your home register doesn't match the school's register, therefore your brain is less capable of complex, abstract thought.
Which is wild. They conflated the clothes with the person wearing them.
That's a great way to put it.
That's honestly horrifying.
Right.
They were penalizing the students for a register mismatch and calling it a cognitive deficit.
Exactly.
But William Labov, the same linguist from the department store study, he actually stepped in to completely dismantle that deficit theory.
He did. In 1969, Labov published an incredibly influential paper called The Logic of Non-Standard English. He went to Harlem and recorded these extended conversations with black teenagers speaking African American Vernacular English, or AAVE.
Right.
Now, by any traditional metric, AAVE is considered an informal register.
But Labov didn't just listen to the words, right?
Yeah.
He did this really rigorous structural analysis of the arguments these teenagers were making.
Yes, and he proved that their arguments were exactly as illogically complex, abstract, and rule-governed as formal academic prose.
Okay.
The logic was identical, it was just utilizing different syntactic packaging.
Can you give me an example of what you mean by syntactic packaging?
Yeah, so take copula deletion, which is a really common feature in AAVE.
Copula deletion.
Yeah, it's when you drop the to be verb. So instead of saying he is working, a speaker might say he working.
Okay, got it.
Well, the deficit theorists pointed to that and said, look, they don't understand basic grammar. Their logic is broken.
Right.
But Labov showed that copula deletion follows incredibly strict, predictable linguistic rules. You can't just drop the verb anywhere. The speaker is actually flawlessly executing the rules of a different register, not making an error.
You know, this reminds me of computer operating systems.
Oh, how so?
Like Mac and Windows can both run the exact same complex algorithms. They can process the exact same profound logic. They just use completely different coding syntax to get there.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Saying someone is illogical because they speak an informal register is basically like saying a Mac is broken just because it won't run a .exe file. Labov fundamentally separated informality from illogic.
Yes. And that separation is why modern linguists are so careful to describe formal versus informal as a matter of social appropriateness and never a matter of cognitive capacity.
Now, I hear the data on AAVE, and the history is super compelling. But I have to admit, I struggle to apply that same grace to modern digital communication.
Oh, texting.
Yeah. Look at how teenagers text today. Dropping punctuation entirely, stelling you with just the letter U, completely fragmented thoughts.
Yes.
Surely this is an exception. I mean, isn't texting actually degrading their ability to use formal language?
It is a super common fear, but we actually have massive amounts of data proving it false.
Really?
Yeah, we have to look at corpus linguistics. This is a field where researchers basically feed millions of words of text into databases to find statistical patterns.
Okay.
And linguists like Douglas Baber have analyzed massive corpora of text messages, and the data shows that texting is not a degradation of language.
But how can it not be? I mean, it breaks every rule of standard grammar.
Because it's adhering to a different set of rules. Texting behaves statistically like a highly efficient, internally consistent, informal to intimate register. It is much closer to casual spoken speech transcribed onto a screen than it is to broken formal writing.
So they are basically just typing in the intimate clock.
Exactly. And to address your fear about it ruining their formal rating studies actually show that students who are heavy texters do not write worse academic essays because of it.
Wow, okay.
In fact, they are functionally bilingual across registers. They instinctively know the text message requires one register and the essay requires another. Informality never equals illogic, even on a smartphone.
Okay, that is a massive relief. But understanding this register flexibility isn't just, an academic exercise to make us feel better about texting.
Definitely not.
The consequences of a register mismatch in fields like healthcare are profound. For the nursing students listening, choosing the wrong register can literally be a matter of life or death.
It is a critical patient safety issue. The sources highlight this truly startling statistic from the National Assessment of Adult Literacy. This was conducted by the U.S. Department of Education.
Okay.
They found that only about 12% of American adults scored at the proficient health literacy level.
12%. That means that usually 9 out of 10 patients are actively struggling to understand basic health materials.
Yeah.
Why is the gap so huge?
Well, historically, healthcare documentation operates in a dense, formal register that's heavily reliant on Latinate medical jargon, words like myocardial infarction, hypertension, or edema.
Which is entirely appropriate for charting.
Yeah.
I mean, nurses have to master a dual role here.
Yeah.
When you are writing a chart note or documenting a procedure or doing a physician handoff, you need that consultative to formal register.
Right.
You use the Latinate jargon because in a medical chart, liability and absolute undeniable precision are paramount. You really can't be vague in a legal document.
Yeah. Exactly. But the actual clinical skill comes in the transition. The moment you turn away from that chart and face the patient, you must adjust that tenor slider on your mental mixing board.
Right.
You have to instantly shift down to a casual or informal plain English register. You swap myocardial infarction for heart attack and edema for swelling. In fact, health communication research consistently advises writing patient materials at a 6th to 8th grade reading level.
Which isn't dumbing it down.
No, not at all.
It is a deliberate, evidence-based register shift to ensure the message is actually received. And this busts a couple of massive misconceptions. First, there's this lingering idea that formal always needs more respectful.
In healthcare, that is a dangerous myth. Register appropriateness, not the level of formality, is what signals respect.
Okay.
If a patient is terrified in the ER and a nurse speaks to them in a frozen or formal register, the nurse is going to sound robotic, alienating, and cold.
Right.
Shifting into a warmer, informal register while still maintaining medical accuracy is actually perceived as highly empathetic and respectful of the patient's emotional state.
Another misconception I hear all the time, and I hear this even in corporate environments, is that using contractions is unprofessional.
Yeah, that is completely outdated advice. Modern professional style guides, especially in healthcare, actively recommend using contractions, shorter sentences, and direct address, like literally using the word you.
Huh.
They prescribe these informal features because they break down social distance, they build trust, and they significantly improve patient comprehension.
So to weave all this together, from the department stores of New York to modern hospital, charting our understanding of language just has to evolve.
Yeah.
Jews showed us that everyone naturally shifts between 5 different clocks, right?
Yeah.
From frozen down to intimate. And then Lebov proved that we do this subconsciously in milliseconds to adapt to our environment. He also proved that speaking casually doesn't mean you are thinking illogically. Your brain is basically just running the Mac OS instead of Windows.
Exactly.
And ultimately, in high-stakes environments like healthcare, formal language is for the documentation, but informal language is for the human being sitting in front of you. Misunderstanding that distinction isn't just a grammar mistake, it drives poor health outcomes.
Getting the register wrong in the real world is judged far more harshly and honestly has much steeper consequences than getting a textbook grammar rule wrong.
It all comes back to knowing which outfit to wear to which event.
It really does.
But I want to leave you all with something to chew on. We discussed how heavily modern life relies on digital, text-based communication, which, as we established, operates almost entirely on the casual and intimate clocks. If that trend accelerates, what happens to the frozen informal registers? Do they eventually shrink from lack of use? Will the language of legal documents and academic papers evolve into something completely unrecognizable to us 50 years from now?
It's entirely possible.
Pay attention. The very next time you pull out your phone to send a text or an email, ask yourself which clock is ticking in your head.